you capture the captive, and you undergo a process of conversion of the woman who you took in captivity to convert her to become a Jew. And ultimately you marry her. So the Orach Chaim, which is a Kodesh, which is a semi-Kabbalistic commentary on the Torah, interprets this whole portion on an illusionary level. So he goes to explain. He says that this world, whether it rises or falls, is all dependent on the behavior of the Jews. Who did God create this world for? For Adam, for Adam. Now, who assumed the classification of Adam after the sin of the tree of knowledge? The Jewish people. As a result of receiving and accepting the Torah at Sinai, we are the only people who did not reject it. Was the objective of creation, the playing field, the setting for every challenge in existence is the challenges of the Torah. So only the people who embraced and accepted the Torah unequivocally was the world created for them, because it was created for the Torah. And if the only nation was relevant to Torah are the Jewish people, our actions have that level of significance, either to advance the world or to take it down. So the world rises and falls based on the behavior of the Jewish people. There's a midrash, which he doesn't cite, that if the world to come is meant to be the Jewish people's, and the physical world rises and falls based on the behavior of the Jew, so we speak about illness, disease. The only one should be subject to illness and disease when we fail spiritually should be the Jewish people. The world at large, which are not, their position in existence is the physical world, and their responsibility is not the spiritual. So why are they subject to illness and disease and tragedy? The Jewish people should be subject to that, because we failed on our watch. So the Midrash says something interesting. If the Jewish people are God's people, and they are the only ones who are subject to illness, disease, and tragedy, what's the world going to say about the Jewish people? They're a cursed people. As a result of that, God's name will be disgraced. That God's chosen people are singled out to be cursed and diseased and subject to every level of tragedy, and the world is not. Therefore, God goes and says that this should not happen. Every nation in the world is subject to what the Jews are subject to. Not to the same degree or whatever it is, so it shouldn't be obvious. But on the superficial level, you cannot make a discernment between the Jewish people and the nations of the world. But factually speaking, the world rises and falls based on the Jews' behavior. And he cites a verse in Tehillim, the heavens will rejoice, and the terrestrial rejoices. Hashem Elokeinu yismach v'yogel banu. God will rejoice and have glee within us. And what determines the Jews succeeding or failing? Whether we're able to meet the challenges which are presented to us by the evil inclination. If we're able to get the upper hand, then we've succeeded. If we succumb to his machinations and to his temptations, then we fail. And this is the introduction, how he's going to interpret this whole portion based on illusionary level. Now, what is the greatest challenge of a person's life? What's the battle? An ongoing battle from the moment we're born till we die. 24/7 until the soul leaves the body. What is that challenge? It's called the challenge of the evil inclination. In Hebrew, if it would say limilchama, to the war, it's a war. La milchama, it's a patach. He said, say la milchama. This is the war of wars. As they say, this is the mother of all wars. There's no war which is equivalent to this war. And who are you going against? Oyivecho. This is the arch enemy. This enemy you can't defeat with conventional warfare. The moment we're born, immediately, he lurks and he wants to put us into a stranglehold. He wants to snuff out our souls. That's what he wants to do. And you have to realize that. And you know what he always convinces us, as we'll see in a moment? Either the challenge is too overwhelming, it doesn't even pay to attempt to meet that foe. You know, it's like lahavdil. You know, when the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, they invaded Poland, they came with the Panzer tanks and they strafed Poland with their whatever it was called, their German Air Force, Yimach Shemam Zichrom, and the Polish army came out on horses. You understand? This is primitive warfare versus the most sophisticated, advanced level of warfare. It wasn't even a question. They took over Poland one day with their mechanized forces, the Germans. Lahavdil. We're talking about an enemy who lies in ambush, has the ability to outwit us, outsmart us continuously. It doesn't even pay to engage with this foe. He's so much more powerful than we are. And what about after you failed endless times? Do you think you're going to be able to recover? He beat you multiple times. Now that you failed, now that you have 2 feet in the grave, so to say, God forbid. Do you think you can extricate yourself from your predicament after he's beaten you down so badly? The answer is, firstly, you have to know. When you go and enter into the battle of existence, there's no greater battle in a person's life other than this battle. Because what's at stake? What's at stake is your soul. This existence is only, relatively speaking, temporary. We find Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people, I'm presenting before you life and death. I encourage you to choose life. Choose life. So the obvious question is, if I present you a choice to walk into paradise or go before a firing squad, do you have to be encouraged not to walk before the firing squad and walk into paradise? Moshe says, I'm presenting for you life and death. I encourage you to choose life. I mean, who's he talking to? He speak to a rational, stable person. Of course, he's choosing life. But yet he encouraged you. What do you need all the encouragement? It's a very interesting midrash. And I've mentioned this in the past. A person's traveling and he comes to a crossroads. And he looks to the left, and as far as the eye could see, paved roads, shrubbery, lush vegetation. It's a pleasure beholding. You look to the left, right, trenches, potholes, snakes, scorpions, all kinds of predator animals, as far as the guy can see. And there's an old wise man at the crossroads. And he says to the young man, he says, I know exactly what's going through your mind. You're going to the left, not to the right. Because based on what you understand is coming your way, it's not even consideration to take the right road. You're taking the left road. He says, but I want to explain to you. As attractive as the left road looks, initially, as far as I could see, but I can tell you, after 3 days travel, what you're going to experience, the word catastrophic is an understatement of the reality of what you're going to experience. That's how bad it is. And what you see to the right, it looks at as if it's treacherous and something which is almost very difficult to contend with. After 3 days travel, you're going to come upon something which you can't even fathom the beauty and the value of what that is. And it's forever. And to the left side, after 3 days travel, that catastrophic experience is forever. My advice to you is, as they used to say, hoe the road for 3 days, and then you'll appreciate and understand it was worthwhile, because ultimately what you're going to have. So the Midrash says, life is that treacherous path. But you realize a person lives 70 years. And if you succeed in those 70 years and you merit eternity, which is forever, what is 70 years versus eternity? It's a 3-day travel. That's all it is. Relatively, it's 3 days. It's worthwhile to make that 3-day investment if what you're going to merit is eternity, and eternity is something you can't fathom in terms of its innate value. And to the left, whatever you see is only in the physical. But beyond that, after 3-day travel, we're talking about spiritual oblivion. We're talking about a level of suffering which is not fathomable due to your sin. I encourage you, based on what I understand, because nobody understood spirituality as Moshe did, take the right road. It may be painful temporarily. You have to toil. You have to contend with many issues. Tzaddik v'ralo, all that. But you want to know something? It's worthwhile. Because ultimately, what you're going to merit, it's the ultimate. It's very interesting. The conversation I used to have with my sparring partner, the professed atheist. And after we spent hours in debate on the authenticity of the Torah, is there a God, not a God? So when he realized that he wasn't in such a strong position any longer, he says to me, he says, but I want to ask you a question, Rabbi. He's asking me the question. If the tzaddik is so special in God's eyes, why is he being mistreated? Why does he have such a difficult time? God should pad his pockets with every amenity that his life should be easier. What does God cause his life? Why does he live this paltry life? That's the question he asked me. So what I answered him was, it's very interesting. You have a home in the city. You have a home in Westchester. You have a home in Central America. You have a home in Israel. And what bothers you, when you have everything, why is the tzaddik denied all this material? I said, have you ever had the conversation with the tzaddik? If he feels denied, I said, why don't you have the conversation with the tzaddik? The tzaddik, he feels, although he doesn't have the material, but you have to realize that's not what life's all about. You know, I don't belong to that country club. They deny me membership because I don't have enough strength to lift that golf club. Or I can't afford the caddy fee to pay the caddy to lug that bag on his back. Do I feel denied? That I can't vacation in the south of France? Or whatever it is, to have the home what you have? Does he in any way feel his life is less? Doesn't feel this way. And he puts everything in perspective. And he's not doing for the sake of reward. He's doing only because he appreciates, he understands the value of what he's doing. I said, why don't you speak to the tzaddik? You're looking at the tzaddik through your own lens. And if you would be denied, you'd have a problem with God. But the tzaddik doesn't see through your lens. He has his own lens. And his lens, he sees clarity. He's not complaining. Therefore, initially, before the lens is cleaned and it's cut, that you're able to see clearly through it, Moshe Rabbeinu says, life is not simple. But if you pursue it and you persevere, you begin appreciating the value of your investment. And ultimately, at worst, it's a 3-day trek. Because the payoff is eternity. So what's 70 years versus eternity? It's only 3 days. It's a pittance. We find the Torah tells us that Yaakov worked 7 hard years of labor for the hand of Rachel in marriage, who was the daughter of Lavan. And Yaakov had believed, which was the truth, that Rachel was his true soulmate. She was the mother of Yosef and Binyamin. She's called Akeres Habayis. She was the primary matriarch. And he was willing to work 7 hard years for the hand of Rachel. And the Torah tells us that the 7 years he worked were kiyomim achadim. It was like a few days. It's nothing. No big deal. So the question is, what it means to know. He worked day and night. His father didn't give him a moment's peace. No let up. But the 7 years were like a few days. How could it be? Kiyom machodim. The answer is very simple. You got a piece of real estate. It's like, Peter Stuyvesant. He bought the island of Manhattan for I don't know how many trinkets. The Indians thought they got a good deal because he gave them those trinkets. But the person who got the good deal was Peter Stuyvesant with his peg leg. Got it. You have a piece of real estate's worth $3 billion. And say, you know something? You give me $1 million, it's yours. $1 million is a lot of money. At least at one time it was. But for what you're getting, it's a pittance. Yaakov understanding that he'd be able to meet the objective of existence through Rachel being his matriarch. What am I paying for it? 7 hard years of labor. It's nothing. Because I understand what its value is. His value is only through her am I able to address the objective of creation. So it's meaningless. It's kiyom machodim. It's like I'm working a few days. In terms of what the return of my investment is. It's meaningless. And that's the truth in life. If you see it right, as difficult it may be, especially if you appreciate the value of your investment, and the more you toil and the more you meet the challenge, it only increases the value of your investment. You're encouraged, you're motivated, even to be invested to a greater degree. And that's the tzaddik. But even if you should be waffle on this, it's for 3 days. Because the end of the day, it's eternity. But the evil inclination, he hoodwinks us. And he contrives all kinds of situations to make the negative attractive beyond attractiveness. Man lusts and desires at a level which is all consuming. And he knows exactly how to stoke those coals and how to feed the monster. It's like a person, God forbid, somebody's tried to convince him to take drugs. And he says, you realize when you take these drugs, you'll have a feeling of euphoria of something that on a normal level, you can't experience it. The man understanding the consequences, once you begin, there's no end to it. And it just increases and intensifies. You go from bad to worse. And ultimately, you destroy your life. The man says, no, thank you. I don't even want to begin. But don't you realize with the opportunity you're turning down? I don't see it as that opportunity. Because the cost factor of whatever that momentary pleasure is, or that mindset, that emotional fix, it's not worth it. Because the cost factor is not to be understood. What the downside is. And the upside is, if I don't, I live a normal, healthy, productive life with a lot less distraction. The same thing. The evil inclination comes and he tries to seduce you and tempt you. Begin, but it feeds on itself. Avera gores avera. Once you start at one level, you go from bad to worse. And eventually, You can't even recognize the person that he's that original person who he started with. King Solomon says he envies the dead more than the living. Why? Person's dead. What's his value? Person's alive. He's a vibrant person with all kinds of abilities, all types of endowments. The wisest man says, I envy the dead more than the living. So the Midrash explains what King Solomon is saying is this. When a newborn child was born, everybody's excited. They speak how cute he is. Everybody's making parties. We even say mazel tov, congratulations, whatever you call it. Some people, they have godfathers and mother fathers, everything at the birth of this child. Excited. Fast forward 50 years down the road. What does his life look like? A disaster. But this child, the new innocent born child, we thought. But when you finish living your life and you see what you accomplished, now there's time to take stock. If you made something special of your life, at the end of your life, now you rejoice. Initially, it's all potential. It's opportunity. The question is, would the person take advantage of opportunity or take that opportunity and turn it into something which is disaster? And it equates it to a ship that's been christened, it's going out to sea. The boat is about to be launched. The ship, bands, music, drinking, celebration. And they finally launch the ship. They break the bottle of champagne on the hull of the ship, goes out. Everybody's excited. 6 weeks later, they find out it went down at sea. If the ship's not coming back, what are you excited about? When a person begins his life, are you coming back or you're not coming back? That's the question. And what's it all determined by? Are you going to steer it in the right direction or are you steering it off the cliff? That's the question, where you're going. And therefore, Shlomo Melech says, King Solomon, I envy the dead more than the living, because at the end of life, you see what the person accomplished. At the beginning, you have no idea where the person's going. But from the moment you enter into this existence, you're on the firing squad. You're under the influences of the evil inclination. And you got to fight the level of stamina, the level of cognizance, the level of intervention, the level of energy that's needed, the level of spirituality that's needed to have a level of clarity. It's unceasing. The Talmud says that the evil inclination is the equivalent of a fly, a zvuv. In Hebrew, zvuv is a fly. If you swoosh away a fly, what happens? It doesn't go away. It just keeps coming back. He explains the Chofetz Chaim, you have an enemy. And you beat the enemy so bad, the enemy will only consider coming back after it regroups and is able to replenish its ammunition and its troops and maybe come up with another strategy. Until then, they're not fools. They're not coming back because they've been beaten so badly, they don't want to be destroyed. The evil inclination is like the fly. Until you kill it, it's always come back to fly. You could swoosh it, goes away from one side, comes the other side. It's behind you, comes in front of you. You're always being encircled with that buzz. You're always hearing that buzz. That buzz is called distraction. That buzz is called temptation. But that's the reality of what life's about. When you when you go from the neutral state into the reality state, into this world, you've just entered into the battlefield of life. This is the ultimate battle. I'd mentioned before the Chazal, V'shvili nivra olam. The world was created for man. And I told you it's a double-sided point. It's to understand it correctly or understand it not correctly. Every child who's born into existence is born a little baby, very cute. That little pudgy hand is born with its fist clenched. Every child. Because when a child comes into this world, it believes the whole world is the child's. That's every human being. When a person dies, whenever he dies, 99.9% people die. You know how they die? The hand is wide open. As much as you believe the whole world is yours and you can take it all in, when a person dies, his hand is wide open, flat. They say on the Chafetz Chaim that when he passed away at the age of 99 or 103, and he was known as the Chafetz Chaim because of the work that he authored about Shmir Saloshen, because King David says, Mil Isha Chafetz Chaim. The one who wants life has to be careful what he says. The Chafetz Chaim passed away, his fist was clenched. He took in the whole world. Because the world he pursued was not the material world. There's a famous word from the Avos Reb Nosson, which is the equivalent of Pirkei Avos, was written in the Tanaic period. A person, when he passes away, he hasn't even assumed 50% of his desires. Initially, he thought you're taking it all in. Not even 50% have you able to achieve. But when you came, your fist was clenched. I'm taking it all in. At the end of the day, not even 50%. And at the end of the day, the value of the less than 50% is not even 50%. And that's what the person's hand is flat, wide open. What did I take? You know, every morning in the chakra service, we say, after the blessings of the morning, we say, what are we? What's our life worth? What's our chesed? The wisest people versus God are like you're born without intelligence. Your inside is meaningless. Compared to God, we're nothing. But we live in our own bubble. We believe, we're God's gift to humanity. We're the brightest, most creative, charismatic personalities, the life of the party, this and that. Batting average, nobody has your batting average. Nobody spews from your mouth the way this guy spews from his mouth. If they would fine you for pollution, they put you away forever. But it's only physical pollution, not spiritual pollution. What comes out of this guy's mouth, right? That's what it is. That's what this portion is speaking about. The Shavisa Shivyo, you go to battle and you succeed. The Shavisa Shivyo, you captured the captive. Who's the captive? The captive is the soul of the person. Most people, we don't have a great record, but you always could clean up that record. You can always make good. It's called tshuva, by repenting. You repent, you're recapturing the captive that was taken from you. Who took your soul into captivity? That's the enemy. That's the evil inclination. He captured you in the neshama. So if you want to recapture the captive, there's a way to do it. And that's what this portion is speaking about. The Gilchas Rosha, removal of the hair, cutting of the nails, taking off the ostentatious type of clothing, limiting your indulgence in many things. You got to turn over another leaf. The Talmud tells us, there's a scientist here, that God created the physical world with the spirituality of the letter Hey. What is the physical structure of the Hey? It's a dalid. You have a horizontal line, and you have on the right side a right leg, which attaches to the horizontal line, a vertical line. And on the left side, you have a vertical line, but it doesn't attach to the roof of the dalid. That's what a Hey looks like in Hebrew. The form of a Hey, the letter Hey in the Hebrew alphabet. What does it represent? The world was created with spirituality with the Hey. This world, God says, you know something? Choice is so free, that if a person chooses to go into free fall, you can do anything you want. You could forfeit your life. You could live a life of hedonism, a life of sin, a debased life. It's your choice. It's wide open. The representation of the model of the right leg and the left leg, it's wide open, big space. You're on top of the mountain. You choose to jump. It's a wide ravine. You could go into free fall. What happens when the person all of a sudden goes, he's to the bottom, he's bottom of the pit, and he wants to come back. He realizes his ways were errant, not acceptable, according to Talmud. Person says, you know something? I'm going to retrace my steps. I'm coming back, and I'm going to come back through the same exit that I left. I'll use that as the entrance. The exit will be the entrance. Talmud says it's not going to work. Not going to work. I'll keep the same friends I have, the same lifestyle, but now that I have clarity within that context of lifestyle, I'll make good on it. It's not reality. You have to turn over a leaf that person is no longer you. You don't eat the same food any longer. You don't dress the way you used to dress. You don't talk the way you used to talk. You don't have the same peer group. Because if you continue with that group, you're not changing. You're not going to be able to make the changes. You know what you have to do? There's a small opening on the left side. You have to come through that new entranceway. There's no entrance. You can't go back the same exit that you exited. You can't come through that way anymore. You have to make monumental changes in your life. People who are criminals and then they become state's evidence. What do? They give them a new identity. They send them off somewhere. Nobody even knows who they are. That's really for protection. But if people know who you are, Al Capone, Bugsy Siegel, all these characters, Jewish, non-Jewish. He walks into shul and they still call him Bugsy. And he's wearing a black coat and a black hat. And he grew a beard. The moment he hears the word Bugsy, and they call him up for Levi because he was Siegel, means he's a Levite. You understand? He's walking out the door and he's going to feel his vest area to see if he has his pistol there. That's Bugsy Siegel. You have to strip yourself of the past identity. I am a new person. I am a different person. That's the only way it works. As much as the evil will convince you, there's no reason to become a different person. Just show up. Buy a nice silver cup. Give a little charity. You realize you're not going to redeem your soul. You have to make a major overturn, a life change. Like a person, he has 4 clogged arteries and he needs a major bypass, first stents bypass. And the doctor says, I just want to tell you something. If you continue this, even after the bypass, you're not going to live very long. You're going to die because the new arteries can get clogged. And if you don't stop smoking, you get emphysema and you're going to die. The person says, but I've been smoking and eating this way my whole life. The person says, you have a choice, the doctor says. Either change your lifestyle, but how am I supposed to? People are eating all these kinds of foods. My wife brings it into the house. And I'm in a smoke-filled room. How do I not smoke? Doctor says, you're born with intelligence. Tell your wife not to bring the food into the house. Don't allow them to be exposed to that food. Don't be in a smoke-filled room. Be in a pristine area which there's no trace of what your past was. Then you have a chance. Otherwise, you have no chance. In the physical, we understand it. When it comes to the spirit, what do I have to change my lifestyle? What do I have to change my peer group? Why can't I wear the same shoes and that same Brioni suit? I'll have the shotness label put into it. So it's not going to be shotness anymore. It's not going to make the grade. Guaranteed failure. But the evil inclination, this is the arch enemy. He will convince you for today, forever. It's totally unrealistic. It's insanity. But you understand, you have to turn a deaf ear. You will see in captivity. Who are you going to see? Esha Sifas Torah, a woman who has a beautiful profile. Beauty. Who do you see? The Jewish soul. Rav Chaim Volozhiner cites a Zohar that even the greatest angel cannot fathom the dimension of the Jewish soul. A non-Jewish soul, the great angel understands. A Jewish soul cannot fathom. It radiates at a level which even the angel cannot stand in its presence. What happens if that soul becomes tarnished and eventually have all kinds of layers of impurity on it? It stops radiating. It doesn't glow as it did. But innately, what is it? It's something has a level of beauty, nothing compared to that level of beauty. You will see in captivity the soul that you're taking back. It's a captive. It's obvious from what it looks like it was in captivity. If you remember, when the prisoners of war came back from Saigon, after the Vietnam, they were in captivity. I don't know for how long. What they looked like, the prisoners of war, malnourished, or whatever they were. You know what the soul looks like after it's been through what it's been through? This epitome of holiness, of radiance, of beauty, it's been coated with endless levels of grime, spiritual impurity. Has to be stripped. Many years ago, going back, there was a person, came about Tshuva, and he worked for Sotheby's, and he was in the restoration business. He would restore antiques. And he explained to us then, and you have a piece of furniture. It was a cabinet maker had built it 600 years ago. But since then, it's been through plenty. People painted it, they varnished it, and they this, it, and that. There's a whole art. You have to strip away the various levels of paint, of varnish, and get back to the original wood and restore it. And bring it to a level that it's literally in its original state. Because over the years, hundreds of years, the abuse, the way people didn't appreciate its value, they treated it like an ordinary piece of wood. God forbid, you treat the soul like as if the person's animal is an animal that has intelligence, intelligent animal. That's all you are. Advanced, superior animal. So how do you live your life? Like an animal, more creatively, more indulgent, because it's not part of your DNA that you live based on your DNA. You have choice. So you could be creative. You could push the envelope to the nth degree. Shavisa Shivyo. But it's Eshish Vastor. But when you begin revealing what it is, it is known, Mr. Glick should live and be well. And not too far off, he's going to be celebrating his 98th birthday. He was king of the diamonds. He belonged to the sites of De Beers, and once a month he would go to England. And because he was that level of customer, every month you had to take a box of rough. And the box of rough, which was the diamond in the rough, a box could cost $18-20 million. And you had to take it every month. And you have no idea what they put in that box. And it had to do with the way the Bears value do. That's the kind of rough they would put in there to maximize on the customer's profits. And because Mr. Glick had a special relationship with them, he would receive special quality rough. But there's another Jew who was on Fort. He was the expert in rough. And he would advise Mr. Glick, who was maybe 20 years younger than Mr. Glick. He was a Hasidic Jew. He would look at that piece of rough and he would see the potential in that diamond. It was a diamond in the rough. What ultimately, how it should be cut, and what you're able to maximize on its profit, on it, to bring out the beauty of every aspect of that rock, of the rough. When the soul is coated over, you don't even see it's a diamond. You believe it's a piece of coal. It's only when you removed those layers of grime and impurity, all of a sudden you realize this is not a piece of coal, but it's just a blackened soul. But if you're able to remove all the various layers of impurity, you begin realizing what its essence is. And it says, what do you do with the soul? You cut off the hair, cut the nails, remove the garment of captivity. What's the garment of captivity? The Yoshua b'Veisecho, and she sits in your head. What's the house of the Jew? The house of Jew is the synagogue and the study hall. That's Beisecho. When you take that soul and bring it back in its environment, it's interesting. You find Moshe Rabbeinu, when originally he had the experience at the burning bush, God says, you'll be the Redeemer, take the Jews out of Egypt. And Moshe spoke critically of the Jewish people. So besides being punished for that, God says that proof will be when they serve me on that mountain. I mean, today they look like they're at the 49th level of impurity, the gates of impurity. But you're going to be amazed. In 49, 50 days, you will not recognize those people as being the people who left Egypt. They can be a different people, but how? How do you turn monkey into man? The answer was never monkey. He may have looked and behaved like a monkey, but the essence is what? Is angel. You only need the right environment to restore that person to be truly what he is. And God says to Moshe, the sign of who they are will be proven when they serve me on that mountain. When I present my Torah to them and they say, Nasa v'nishma, we accept unequivocally, then you'll appreciate who they are. Today, because they're overgrown with all this impurity, you can't appreciate that's what the behavior is about. I mentioned not long ago, Meir Shapiro, Zecher Tzaddik Brocha, who's the one who introduced the Daf Yomi, that throughout the world, every day, people learn the exact same folio of Talmud, every single day, wherever they're in the world. And they finish the Talmud every 7 years. Following this approach, he was a phenomenal orator, never had children. And he had a charisma one of a kind. And he built the yeshiva in Lublin. It was the first yeshiva that had a dormitory and had indoor plumbing in Europe. And he built this in the 30s. And he raised, the majority of money he raised was in the United States. And it must have been it was right before the Depression. He was in Chicago and he spoke. And there were wealthy Jews in Chicago. And he spoke to the crowd and he said, there's a word in the Torah, the word is kruvim, cherubs. We find on the ark of the Mishkan, there were 2 cherubs which extended their wings. In Hebrew, it's called kruvim. So Rashi says, what are kruvim? What are cherubs? So he cites the Chazal, the Midrash, Pneim K'nei Tinokos. Their faces looks like the faces of newborn babies. Newborn babes. That's the meaning of kruvim. But where else do we find kruvim in the Torah? We find that after Adam and Eve ate of the tree of knowledge, they were driven from the Garden of Eden, and God put 2 kruvim, 2 cherubs with a swinging sword at the entrance, that Adam and Eve cannot go back into the Garden of Eden. Even they attempt, they cannot go back. So it uses the term kruvim, also cherubs. And Rashi over there says, what is the meaning of kruvim? Peneim malechei chavola, accosting angels. So he asked the question, in one context, what are kruvim? The purity of newborn babies. That's mean kruvim. And there, it's little monstrous angels, accosting angels, overwhelming angels that they paralyze you with fear. Is it A or is it B? So what he said with his ingenious insight, he says, the cherubs on the Aron, on the ark, what was contained in the ark? The broken tablets, the second set of tablets, and the Torah. When you take that Jewish child and you expose him to the Torah, he has the purity of a newborn baby. You take that same Jewish child and you expose him to the sword, what does he become? He becomes a monster. Same child. It's all based on environment. And that's what it's about. You take the soul that's been exposed to all the negative influences of the world. You don't want to see its radiance because it's so coated over with all this impurity. But when you take it out of captivity, there's a process. Where do you bring it? You bring it into a Jewish environment where all kinds of amenities and support systems to restore that. I mentioned, not in this class, that what is the basis of saying Kaddish? Person's parent passes away, a child says Kaddish for 11 months or for a year. What is Kaddish? Kaddish is a public sanctification of God's name. And because the child says Kaddish, the child of that deceased, and that child makes through this declaration a public sanctification of God's name, that sanctification accrues to the parent. Because that child only lives because the parent brought that child into the world. That's the value of Kaddish. Where does it originate from? So there's a Gemara. And what's the Gemara? Rabbi Akiva was the greatest Torah sage of his time, was traveling the desert, and he sees a blackened person as if he was burnt, carrying a load of wood on his back. And Rabbi Akiva was at a level he was able to see things we can't see. And he says to this burnt soul that's in the form of a human body, who are you? He says, I'll tell you who I am. Before I died, I was a butcher, very wealthy butcher. There's no indulgence that I deny myself, nothing. And I had a child from a Jewish woman. I never circumcised that child. I never raised him as a Jew. So every day, you know what they do to me? They burn me in hell. I gathered wood to be burnt, and every day they burn me, recreate me, and burn me every day. The level of suffering is intolerable. It's excruciating. So Rabbi Akiva says to him, what is your name? From what town did you come? I will seek out your son. And Rabbi Akiva went and sought out this butcher's son. He was uncircumcised. He didn't even circumcise him. And Rabbi Akiva, being the dimension of person he was, he meets him and he speaks to him and he tells him what his background is, who his father was, and explained to what the value of a Jew is. And he agreed to be circumcised. And he had him circumcised. That's the first thing. Then he taught him the Hebrew alphabet. And then he taught him the Shema. And he brought him to a level to be an observant Jew, the son of this butcher. Then he taught the son Kaddish, that the son, in the context of a quorum, should say Kaddish, to make a public sanctification of God's name every day. And this is what happened. A few weeks later, the soul comes to Rabbi Akiva in the dream. And he says, I must thank you, because what you did on my behalf, they allowed me to enter into the Garden of Eden, into the world to come. Until then, they would not let me get near it. But now that what you've done for my child, and he's only exists because I brought him into existence, and he's the one who's bringing about all this public sanctification of God's name, everything accrues to me. Therefore, I'm worthy they should let me into the Garden of Eden. That's the story. But if you're so far gone, child literally doesn't even know he's Jewish. He has no semblance, but you could be taught. No soul is totally extinguished. There's always that slight spark. You can ignite it. And you can ignite it from the 40 levels of spiritual purity. 50 days later, they're standing at Sinai, embracing and accepting God's word unequivocally. The Nasa B'Nishma, where God is amazed and says, Mi Gila Razel, who revealed the secret to my children? They speak like angels. And that's what this portion is alluding to in terms of the Jewish experience, how far it could fall and how it could be brought back.